The Tour is so important in the big scheme that if Pogačar wins all these races and doesn't win the Tour, it's not a success.
It's not a success for him. It's potentially good for cycling, though.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
Because then we get, like, I would assume the only rider to beat him would be Jonas. Like, if Jonas gets another win, Pogačar is dominating the one days. That's pretty juicy, actually, as a narrative and as a viewer. Everybody, welcome back to the Move Plus, our weekly show. I'm Spencer Martin. I'm here with Johan Bruyneel. We will go through a few topics of the week, including Tom Pidcock's move to Q36.5. Why is that happening? How is this happening? Why is it a good idea? A little bit of Soudal-QuickStep news with Remco Evenepoel out until February, perhaps, and their leader, Patrick Lefevere, stepping down, as well as Tadej Pogačar's program for this coming year and his team's new bikes that have everyone excited, confused, not quite sure what year it is. Is it 1992? We don't know. But before we get into that, Johan, I want to talk about our sponsor, Zwift. Zwift just released the Zwift Ride, an all-new smart bike that is changing the indoor game and making it easier and more affordable than ever before to get started riding indoors. You may not be a fan of riding indoors normally, but Zwift, the program, has totally transformed that. And now the Zwift Ride will just add to that experience and make it even more enjoyable, even better. So you can start logging the big miles in the middle of winter. So if you're like me, you can catch up. I won't catch up to you this year, Johan, but start laying that base for 2025. Come out of the gate hot with the new Zwift Ride. The bike is ultra quiet, which is really important if you're inside with multiple members of your family. They don't want to hear a loud trainer. It's also super easy to set up. You just need one tool, the frame key, to build it all and make any adjustments to saddle height, bar height, and reach. And that's also hugely important if you're like Johan and I, and you share an indoor bike with someone in your family, and they're a different size than you. You can just use one bike, and everyone can set it to what they need it. And once you're done with that frame key, it slots right back into the magnetic holder in the frame, so you never lose it. The Zwift Ride is just $1,299.99. It's a total game changer, and at that price, it is within much more. It's much more affordable than past all-inclusive indoor riding machines. I'll just leave it at that. And you can join We Do for our rides on Zwift, which are currently running all through the winter. We Do Wednesday. It's like, they call it a casual no drop ride, but you can get a workout on it. And then Suffer Sunday, which is like a 2.5 to 3 hour, pretty brutal ride over multiple climbs in the Zwift world. If you want to push your limits, sign up for that. Find us on Zwift and look at the Zwift Ride at Zwift.com to enhance your indoor riding experience. Johan, you have one of these, right? Am I correct in thinking that?
I do, and it's true what you say. It's super easy when you share a bike. Today, for example, my son, he actually just finished a 1.5 hour ride on the bike, on the Zwift Ride. I want to add to everything you said, Spencer. It's also the big difference compared to the formal setup of the smart trainer and a bike. It's so stable. It's unbelievably stable. The bike doesn't move. And I think it just makes it a lot more comfortable, especially if you go longer than an hour. It could, sometimes indoor riding can become hard, when you have to sit down all the time. Also, the interactive handlebar is a game changer, in my opinion. It makes it more entertaining. You can, see what you're doing in the bunch, and I really like it. And as you say, it's super quiet, and the virtual shifting is really also super nice.
Well, speaking of bikes, positions, indoors, the big question, everyone needs to know this. We mentioned it and then glossed over it for a few weeks. You mentioned over Thanksgiving that you were going to try riding your road bike outside with your brake hoods canted inwards. How did that go? Everyone needs to know how you enjoyed that or did not enjoy it.
I did try that. That's true. Initially I was kind of excited about it. Said, it makes sense if you think about it. I lasted 2 rides, Spencer. I did it for 2 rides. And I didn't go completely back to completely straight. I left it, inwards a little bit, but to me, it makes a lot of sense because you can actually get a really aero position like that. But, I think you need to be young, you need to be flexible, and you need to be able to train in that position a lot. 3 things I can't do because I'm not young anymore. I'm not flexible, and I can't train. I mean, I can't keep myself in that position for a long enough time. So I understand why they are doing it. That was the purpose. But I went back to before because, I have to prioritize comfort over speed. And I just can't stay for long enough in that position. But it does make a lot of sense. I felt that, I can do it for like 5 minutes. But if you want to stay in an aero position for a long time, that's not for me anymore. But so I'm back to where I was before.
We got the Ventum sent us very kindly, sent the spikes, both of us. And the one I got, the handlebars are like, I can't tell if the handlebars are slightly bent in or if there's the hoods are slightly in. And I find that to be like the best. They're thin bars. They're much thinner than my old ones. And they're just slightly bent in. That's like a good happy medium, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays also, things have changed so much. If you look at, some handlebars, depending on the brand, they're like, narrower on the top, and then they go a bit wider, not a gravel handlebars, but even on the road. And certain teams are actually using them also. So I think that's a good compromise. Just a little bit narrower on top, the brake levers tilted in a little tiny bit. What I found actually really uncomfortable, but I guess it's also getting used to it. But with the brake levers tilted in, is when you stand up on the pedals on the brake levers on the hoods. It feels really strange because obviously you're a lot narrower, and for me it's a no-go. But it's more because of comfort, and also I just don't feel safe. I can understand that young riders who have been starting like this or who are used to this, it makes sense. I would actually also recommend not to go too narrow. I think that's something that we've talked in the past about safety. The narrow handlebars, in my opinion, there needs to be a limit. I see that there's a lot of riders already with 36, 38. I think that's about as narrow as you can go, especially in a peloton on the road with 200 riders. I think it's not for nothing that mountain bike handlebars are really wide. It gives you a lot of stability. The road racing is not the same, of course, but there's a limit to everything. And 38, 36 already. I think 36 is a bit of a stretch. Especially if it's a tall guy, and the narrower the handlebars, also the easier it's to go into a gap that sometimes is not there. Before we all had 42s or 40.
Yeah.
There was no space to put your handlebars in there, right? So yeah. I mean, anyway, just a thought, but I think the width of the handlebar should be limited at a certain point. I don't know what that is, but we don't have to go like super narrow, in my opinion.
Well, speaking of mountain bike, road bike, the mixture of the two, Tom Pidcock, we talked about, and we recorded last week's show at the worst possible time. It was about 4 hours before Tom Pidcock released the news that he was in fact going to Q36.5. That's the team he left the Ineos Grenadiers for. I don't think anyone that had been paying attention was A, surprised he was leaving Ineos, or B, that he picked Q36.5. I think we said in last week's show that we thought he would go there. It's if you aren't familiar with the details, it sounds quite confusing. You're like, wait a second, let's just walk up to someone on the street like, hey, one of the most, I guess, like celebrated, anticipated, exciting riders in the world is leaving one of the biggest teams and going to one of the smallest teams and worst performing teams. They might be confused by that. But Johan, when you dig into this, it actually kind of makes sense for him because he can choose his program. I think you mentioned this not on the air, but off the air last week, that one-day races get 7 non-World Tour invites. 3 of those go to the best 3 performing second division teams, but that leaves 4 wildcard teams. So there'll be plenty of room for Tom Pidcock in Q36.5 at any one-day race they want to go to. Grand Tours could be a little bit more difficult, but Tom Pidcock at Ruler Live said he didn't really want to do Grand Tours. He wants to focus on the one days. He didn't. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he did said he wanted to focus on one days classics. That's where he sees his future. So this could be good for him. And if they have the money to pay for him, they're probably not paying even his full salary. I actually kind of like it for both parties. The further away we get from this,
I think the determinative factor has been the money. Even at the reduced salary, okay, reduced, what it's going to be. If it's true that he was making 5 million, whatever that is, pounds or whatever, I mean, Ineos is not going to pay more than a third of that salary. So there's still 2/3 to be paid, which is still, 3.5 million or 3.7 million. There's not that many teams who can afford that unless there's an extra budget available. It's not out of the planned budget. And in the case of Q36.5, we all know that the owner and the financial backer is a wealthy individual who owns the company, who owns a few other companies that are related to cycling, one of them being Pinarello. So there's definitely deep pockets there. I'm pretty sure that some of the sponsors of that team have also come up with an extra. It's Q36.5 is actually the smallest sponsor, the smallest company of all the sponsors, because there's UBS, there's the bank, the Swiss bank, there's Mercedes, there's Breitling, I think. So there's a few big companies that maybe have come up with extra budget. So I think that's the determining factor is the money. For sure, Pidcock wants to make minimum the same amount of money that he was making at Ineos, otherwise he wouldn't have been leaving. So if you narrow it down to the candidates, there's not that many who can do that. Then on top of that, he gets a freedom to ride the different disciplines he likes: cyclocross, mountain bike, and road. They're not focusing on big tours, grand tours right now. So that kind of falls into place nicely. And on top of that, I think the owner of Q36.5 it's a win-win for him, because he has Pidcock in his team with the team jersey. They're riding Scott on the road. And there's an agreement with Scott and with the team that Pidcock will remain both on cyclocross and in mountain bike on Pinarello, which is owned by the owner.
Yeah, that's kind of...
It falls nicely into place, everything. And then I think, let's not forget, Pidcock is still a young rider. He's not that old. So I think that they're going to use the figure of Pidcock to grow as a team. It's now also going to be more, it's easier, as you said, to get into races, but also it's going to be easier to attract, because if you're a small team and there's no strong leader, then it's difficult to get good riders to come to the team. Having the person of Pidcock on the team will actually make it easier to attract good riders in the next 2 or 3 years and build a stronger team.
Well, it gives them much needed identity. I mean, like overnight, it turns the team into, I would say the team and I don't say that to be mean. I just like, what is this? What's going on at this team? Like their best. Do you remember Gianluca Brambilla? He had like the pink jersey at the I think it was a 2016 Giro d'Italia. He's still riding and he's one of that team's best riders. So this really turns things around for them overnight, gives them an identity. They can just build outward from Pidcock.
But also, I think that now in my opinion, they need to change their mentality in terms of building the team, because if you look, I've seen a few riders on that team. In my opinion, they're not cheap. There's Brambilla, but there's a lot of other riders. A few, like
Nizzolo probably is making
3-4 other riders that are, mid-30s or well in their 30s, who are not cheap and actually are not. You can't build on that, So, in my opinion, there needs to be a new mentality, a new way of thinking, and a different strategy in terms of hiring for the future. And I'm pretty sure that, having Pidcock on the team will make that a lot easier.
Well, even just think about what you said about, so Scott is likely paying them to sponsor the team. So they're giving them cash plus bikes. So the owner, Ivan Glasenberg, doesn't have to pay, like someone's paying him. That's like filling up budget. Then his bike brand is getting exposure on the mountain bike and cyclocross, which they were already getting with Tom Pidcock. Like, it's really actually clever how he's worked this out. But
I think it's a good deal. Listen, I mean, Ivan Glasenberg is, he's no spring chicken. He knows what a good deal is, and I'm pretty sure that he has calculated a lot, and there's a good thinking behind this transfer. And I think it's great for Pidcock, but it's great for his team also, for the team of Glasenberg.
So I think we both agree we like it for Pidcock because he just picks his schedule. I'm going to do this race. I'm going to do this race. The team says that sounds great, and then there's no one at that team that's going to say, I think I should actually be the leader. Like, it's the Tom Pidcock show. So it's good for him, good for the team. It's also good for Ineos. And I say that, like, let's just say, to make the math easy, that they're paying £1 million of the 5 million. So they're paying $1 million.
I think they're paying more than that.
Just to keep the math easy, let's say they're paying $1 million in 2025. So it's 2025, 26, 27. But that means in 2025 alone, they theoretically save £4 million. They have one roster spot left. I don't know who I can't imagine they would sign anyone that expensive at where we are right now. So yeah, someone will fill it. They won't be expensive. So essentially they'll save £4 million this coming year. And then the next year they save an additional £4 million. So that's $8 million just over 2 years.
Well, Spencer, it's $3 million. It's $3 million instead of 15 million. It's a 12 million net operation for them.
Yeah, 12 million through 2027 they save. That means, remember Remco Evenepoel's like famous quote for this podcast, but he said, like, I'll be with QuickStep through 2025. And you're like, well, that's kind of weird because your contract runs through 2026. What about that year? But let's say they wanted to pursue him in 2026. They freed up an effective £8 million just in those 2 years to then offer to Pidcock or to Evenepoel, and could actually give him a raise and save money, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, it depends how you look at it, Spencer. We don't necessarily need to think that those 12 million are going to be spent. It may well be that Ratcliffe doesn't want to spend that money anymore and wants to stay at the reduced budget. And I think that would make a lot of sense because the budget of Ineos, if it's true that it's 50 million, that's way too much for what he's getting in return.
Well, so they cleared up a lot of management.
He may as well save that money and not spend it on the team.
Well, but think of their probably two most expensive riders, Geraint Thomas and Egan Bernal. Thomas's contract ends at the end of this coming season, so 2025. Bernal's at the end of 2026. So that's also two. I'm not saying they won't be with the team, but if Geraint Thomas and Egan Bernal re-sign, it's going to be for probably quite a bit less money than they're currently on. So there's like future savings for them. It's the most. I'm pretty negative on Ineos generally, but this is the most actually, like, I feel like they finally potentially turned a corner because they've freed.
I'm still thinking what I said a few months ago. I still think that Ineos is winding down and that in the future they're not going to be around. They in my opinion, they won't be around in 2027 unless maybe somebody else comes in and buys the team or takes over the team. But because they're going to have a 3-year license again, so 3-year World Tour license, so that's worth something. But I can't see this, even with all the changes they've made. I don't think they've made significant enough changes to turn it around. I can't see it.
Well, okay. Well, to pop my bubble, that hurts, Johan. I was trying to be positive. It is, but to actually the facts that back up what you're just saying, and this is really concerning. It's not to do with cycling, but Dan Ashworth was like considered one of the great soccer management minds, like high level sporting director. They court this guy. I think he's on like 6-month gardening leave from Newcastle, making a ton of money, and they're like courting him through that. They sign him. He's their guy to run Manchester United. They just fired him after 6 months, or maybe less than 6 months. And it just makes you wonder, like, what is going on there? And that's probably the Dave Brailsford decision, because he's the sport. He's like he's the executive at large at Ineos. So it doesn't really give you confidence that they have some sort of broader strategy or plan behind the scenes there.
Yeah.
Everybody, before we get into our next section, I wanted to stop and talk about today's partner, which is Storyworth. Christmas is rapidly approaching, and I want to give a gift to my loved ones that makes them feel special and unique, just like the relationship we share. That's why I'm giving everyone I care about Storyworth. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick. Things like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? What's the furthest you've ever traveled? And how did you used to get to school every day? Storyworth makes the writing process a breeze. All your loved ones need to do is respond to that email with a story. Long or short, it doesn't matter. You'll be emailed a copy of your loved one's responses as they're submitted over the course of the year. After that year, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. This is why I am considering getting this for someone like my father-in-law, and he can answer it, and then my kids can have a nice keepsake of all his memories and stories and a beautiful coffee table book that they can keep for the rest of their lives, hopefully. And families love Storyworth. That's why it has more than 35,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot, with millions of stories preserved since they were founded over 10 years ago. With Storyworth, I know that I'm giving those I love most a thoughtful personal gift from the heart and preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/themove and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/themove to save $10 on your first purchase. All right, let's get back to the show. To push back, like, counterpoint is like Juan Ayuso. That guy's not going to be a domestique for Tadej Pogačar forever. So let's say he wants to leave UAE. Where does he go? There's not that many places that, like, wouldn't a fresh Ineos with no Thomas, no Bruyneel, no Pidcock. Theoretically, that's like a decently attractive landing spot.
But it takes a lot of work to rebuild a team, like, with one rider. I agree. Ayuso will probably not stay with Pogačar. Even, I've read his interview. He says, okay, I want to be better than Pogačar in the future. I think he'll have to wait a few years to be honest. He's a really good rider. No, don't get me wrong. He's amazing. He won Tirreno. He won the Basque Country. He was third in the Vuelta. He won a bunch of races already. But
I think he was second at Tirreno.
Was he second in Tirreno? Oh yeah. I think Jonas won. Yeah. But yeah, I saw an interview of him where he said that, he's going to the Giro, which, automatically already means that Tadej is not doing the Giro. But then he says, I want to be better than him eventually. So he will have to move to another team.
Are we sure UAE is committed to Pogačar? I'm kidding. That's a joke. I think they're going to stick with him.
But Ayuso is one of those guys also who has a long-term deal and a huge buyout clause. A huge buyout. I don't know. I don't remember how much it is, but it's the same in the same proportion as the buyout clause of Pogačar compared to the contract he has. So I don't know if he can leave. Anyway, nowadays
he could potentially get so uncomfortable that UAE would have to make a decision, essentially release him, because this doesn't seem like.
Yeah,
I don't really see how that's going to work.
I didn't like. Listen, the guy's super ambitious. He has the mind of a champion, the mind of a winner. I applaud him for that, but his interviews are a bit. They don't help him. Because he comes across as, like whatever he was saying in that interview he just did confirms what we were all thinking in the Tour, that he's not a team player. And whenever he works for the team, it's because it's an obligation, but it's not with his full conviction, which listen, I mean, he's been a winner since he stepped on a bike. He's never been used to be a domestique. He's always been the leader, and they've always worked. There's always worked for him. But you also, I mean, okay, he has backed it up because at his young age he already has incredible performances. But the way the talent is at the top, he's not there. He's not with those guys. He's not at the level of Jonas. He's not at the level of Tadej. He's not at the level of Remco. And time goes fast, So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I do respect it in some way, because like if he doesn't believe in himself, who's going to believe in him? And if he wants to be a winner, like he's got to think that. But all this at the same time, like, do you remember Pogačar giving interviews about how he was going to be better than Lance Armstrong before he won a Grand Tour? No, you didn't. He just went out and won, and you're like, wow, that was impressive. Then he just kept winning. Like at a certain point, but if he wants to be a leader, he's just got to leave. He's got to leave the team. Like that's probably step one. He can't stay there. I'm sure his contract is fantastic, but he should leave. Speaking of Tadej Pogačar, since you brought him up, released his early program, can't be the full program for 2025. Because I don't see world champs on here.
We know he does Milan Strade Bianche, Milan San Remo, Flanders. So Wout and Mathieu and Mats Pedersen know what they have to do. And then Liège, of course, and then the Tour. He says maybe another Grand Tour, depending on the course, but that's going to be the Vuelta, if there's a second Grand Tour. In my opinion, the World Championships in where is it? In
Rwanda.
Rwanda, super hard. And whatever else. Traditional. In any case, Spencer, when I saw that, I said, okay, now if you're in Pogačar's shoes, what do you think? How can he better? How can he better what he has done in 2024? It's almost impossible. And I think he'll focus on his main objectives. Of course, the Tour is the most important. It sounds like Milan San Remo is very, very high on his wish list. Difficult race to win for him, because he will have to, drop everybody on the Poggio. Maybe he goes on the Cipressa. I don't know. He's not slow either. So, but normally if he attacks and there's somebody with him, nobody will pull with him. So it's highly likely he would have to come by himself to the finish, which is possible, but not easy, Milan San Remo. It's going to be interesting. I like it. I like the fact that he does those races. Milan San Remo, Flanders, and Liège are probably the three highlights of his spring. And then full focus on the Tour de France. And
I'll just list what I see here, so everyone knows: UAE Tour, Strade Bianche, Milano San Remo, E3, Ghent-Wevelgem, Tour of Flanders, Amstel Gold, Flèche Wallonne, Liège, Dauphiné, Tour, Lombardia. I have to imagine Worlds is probably going to be included in there. The thing about San Remo, it's fun that he does it. Like, love it. It's very hard to win for a rider like him, because I think even if he sits in, like if Philipsen's there, Philipsen's probably winning this sprint. I actually would like to see him try it, but I also think it's fun. He can just try a different thing every year. Like he only needs to win it one time. Like there's not an overwhelming amount of no one's sitting around thinking, are we sure Pogačar is great because he hasn't won Milano San Remo? But it just slots into his, like, physically, it's very close to his house. It slots into his training pretty well. Like he can do it. And like he's getting out there, getting some exercise, getting a nice 7-hour ride in on a Saturday with his friends. Like he'd be doing that anyway. It's potentially too easy for his training program. That's the only problem, is he has to do a harder ride the next day to make up for the early parts of San Remo. But I can tell you, though, the way he betters last year to win the double, to do Flanders-Roubaix, win, and then win the Tour. Someone,
doesn't do Roubaix.
Well, he's not doing it. I don't think he will. But Killian Kelly, he used to work at, I think, Eurosport and GCN. He had a good point the other day. He said, Roubaix, and I don't know if these rules apply to Pogačar. I don't know if rules apply to him in general, but Roubaix is the classic that takes the longest to win. It's something like an average of 5 attempts before someone wins Roubaix. So if, in theory, if you want to win Roubaix, you should do it as early as possible. I think Sonny Colbrelli did win it on clinchers on the first time he did it. So that does prove that you can do it. And Pogačar is good enough. He can probably get away with it. But I mean, I'm not saying he should do it, but if he wanted to like better last year, it would be the Flanders Roubaix double plus the Tour.
Spencer, now you listed the all those races there. My first thought is okay, all these classics, Milan-San Remo, Flanders, Amstel, Flèche, Liège. There's a lot of risk, man, of crashes.
True. But
he does, of course, does ride in the front. He has a strong team that keeps him in the front, but the risk is always there. It's heavy on the classics. His program is heavy loaded with classics. So, we all know what happened in Liège 2 years ago. I mean, you can't think about that, and you can't have fear of crashing. But if you have, towards the Tour de France, unless the Tour is not a priority, but I would have to think that the Tour is always a priority. It's easier to prepare and to stay out of trouble with a traditional stage race program rather than a program with classics.
Well, that's what we think and say, but where did everyone get hurt last year? The stage race program.
Yeah, one stage, yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, yeah, the classics are dangerous. They're probably more predictable, though, if you're a big rider. But no, I guess look at Van Aert at Dwars. He was in the front. It's just kind of these chaotic sections in between cobbles. So there's risk there for sure. But, you got to do the races. He's out here to race. He's won the Tour 3 times. Like, it's not, I don't think he's thinking, if I don't defend my Tour title, this has been disaster of a season.
He wants to tick the boxes, right? But again, the Tour is so important in the big scheme that if Pogačar wins all these races and doesn't win the Tour, it's not a success.
It's not a success for him. It's potentially good for cycling, though.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
Because then we get, I would assume the only rider to beat him would be Jonas. Like, if Jonas gets another win, Pogačar is dominating the one days. That's pretty juicy, actually, as a narrative and as a viewer.
And it's 3-3 in the last 6 years.
So, those guys, I have to imagine one of those guys wins again. But he's going to be doing all this, I think. Have we confirmed this? But on the new bike, the new Colnago, the Y1R, I would call it an ultra aero bike. They're coming from the V4R, which is just aesthetically, it's one of my favorite bikes in the Peloton. It's just kind of like classic, simple aesthetics. Like when you see it in person, you think, wow, I would just like to have that bike. The problem with that bike is it's not an aero bike. The whole team runs deep dish MV wheels like every race, which would tell you they're probably trying to make up for the lack of aero bike. And they've done testing and realized we need to run the deepest wheels we can in every race to be on the same level as everybody else. But, it's the bike you would want at home. But I think what we're seeing in professional cycling is this YR1 is so funky looking, like it's not really 2 triangles. Not clear to me actually how that's compliant within UCI regulations, but it's going back to basically your era, Johan, like what we saw in the 90s with all these funky road bikes that kind of didn't look like road bikes, but were fast. And I assume they've tested this and that it is fast. So we're seeing a return to the 90s, but kind of what we're seeing is a decoupling from, I guess it makes sense in theory. Tadej Pogačar should probably ride a different bike than you and I should ride. Going back to your comfort and safety comments, we probably don't need to ride the same bikes, and Colnago can sell us a bike that looks nice and then sell him a bike or give him a bike that's fast. And we're probably seeing that happen here.
Yeah, well, in the case of Colnago, we all know that, first of all, they didn't have an aero bike. Most of the big brands let the top riders have the option in between a light climbing bike, as I say, or an aero road bike. Most of the brands have that option. Colnago didn't have that option. Plus, from what I've heard, there was some unhappiness with some of the riders that the bike was not one of the best bikes out there. It looks nice. It's the traditional old style Colnago. The what's it called? The V4R.
V4R, yeah. They need to work on the names here.
Yeah. But not one of the fastest bikes out there. So imagine if Pogačar gets a fast bike now.
It's over.
But I think it was at the request of the riders and also to keep up with the competition. And we don't know how much of those data that we have seen and that they're publishing are marketing, or some of the data are right. I'm pretty sure that an aero bike is faster than a road bike. The bike itself is faster. Now, if you look at a rider on the bike, I think things start to change. It's not that much of a difference anymore because the total frontal surface of a rider on a bike, the bike is really only a small part. But, Colnago claims that their new bike is 19% aerodynamically faster than their road bike that they were using. And is now up par with their strongest competition. They don't specify who that is, but I'm gonna suggest it's either Cervelo, the aero bike, or Canyon, probably.
Yeah,
the aero road bike. I don't dislike it, Spencer. If you look at the geometry, you can say, yeah, okay, there was things in the 90s, in the early 90s that were like this, but they were not as fast. There was not so much science behind it as there is now. I'm pretty sure that this bike has been tested. It's been designed by, I think the designer of the bike is actually somebody who was working for BMC and their aero bike. Is it the road machine or the speed machine, whatever? The BMC.
Man, it might be speed. I think the time trial bike is the time machine. The road bike's the road machine.
Something, but they have an aero. The BMC has a really fast aero bike. It's the same designer who was working on this. Apparently, he's been working on it for 3 years. There's the geometry of the bike, of course, but I think the biggest thing is the cockpit, the wing-shaped handlebars. I think that's. It looks really fancy. The question is, how much marketing is it to sell these bikes? The bikes are 16,000 euros, I think. They're not going to sell that many. There's a small pool of people who will buy the bike, but we'll see. Let's not forget the brand Colnago is now owned by the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi. I'm pretty sure in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, there's going to be a lot of cyclotourists from there who will want that bike because they have the buying power. So yeah, we'll see. I like it. It's a bit strange at first, but after seeing it a few times, I've now seen a few pictures and videos of the UAE riders riding it. I think it's fine. I think it's cool.
When you're at the race in person, the UAE bikes looked considerably slower than especially the Cervelo bikes, the Visma bikes. And I guess if Alpecin was running the aero bikes, but this also just gives them another tool, there's nothing to say mountain stage of the tour, Pogačar doesn't jump on the old V4R. It's what Vindigo does. Sometimes they're on the aero bike, sometimes they're on the road bike. I would imagine the mechanics at UAE liked that setup where they all ran the same bike and the same wheels all year long. That was probably a little bit easier, but this just gives them another tool. If it is really fast.
And also, there's also the mental aspect. At the end of the day, it's also a commercial move. Colnago needs to be at the forefront of everything. In the last few years, I've not seen any brand launching a new model who has had so much attention than Colnago now with this new bike. It's all over the place during days already. So already that's a win for them, right? But also, I've seen some. It maybe was as a joke, but some pro cyclists who said, okay, Pogačar has an aero bike now. Cycling is finished. So,
I mean, it does have to be a little, I think a lot of those are jokes, but it has to be a little demoralizing, actually. Like, oh no, he's just going to be faster by himself. That's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
and I mean, in his case, he has been doing these tremendous long rates, solo attacks, 70, 80, 100 kilometers out. I mean, if that's on an aero bike, whew.
Yeah, that is a huge help. Like the World Championships in particular, that escape, he would have been helped quite a bit.
But you have to also factor in the weight, right? I mean, if they're Colnago, their normal light bikes, if they're like, let's say 6.97 kilos, probably with deep dishes, with deep wheels, this one is 7.4, 7.5 kilos. You have to factor in that weight also. It's not always flat, so we'll see. But I like it.
I don't know if you've looked at Colnago's sales numbers, but like whatever this Pogačar situation is working for them. Like they are like doubling their sales every year, starting in 2020 when he won the Tour. So if you've ever wondered, is this worth it for the bike brands? It apparently is.
I know a bike company who had the same kind of thing going on. It was an American bike company who was on the verge of bankruptcy.
This is a little company.
1989, 98, and then they won the Tour once, twice, 3 times, 7 times, ultimately 9 times, and reportedly their sales numbers have doubled every single year, and now they're like almost a multi-billion company. So it seems to work if you have a rider, a good top rider winning the biggest races in the world on your bike.
Yeah, it definitely works. I was a victim of that. I bought one of those American bikes when I was a kid because I saw someone winning the Tour on them. Remco Evenepoel. We talked about he had a crash, the dooring of the van. I kind of thought, he'll be back training pretty fast. This is some quotes from Remco recently that stuck out to me. This is Remco talking, starting now. I'm not allowed to do anything for a good month, Evenepoel said. On January 6th, I have another scan to see if everything is growing together properly. Only then can we drop a new plan. I hope to be back on the bike in early February. So that is significant time off the bike.
Yeah, okay. That's an official statement. I can understand that, but let me tell you, any pro cyclist, Spencer, as soon as they can move their legs, it doesn't matter what happens up here. From the chest up, if their hips are okay and their legs are okay, they're going to be turning their legs on a bicycle. Let me tell you, even if it's sitting down in the sofa on one of those, he's going to ride. Let me tell you, that's just in their DNA. So, I'm not worried about that.
He also might, if we're reading, he might be leaving something out. Like, I hope to be back on the bike might mean like I hope to be back outside training normally. Yeah, like who knows? Like, is he really not on the trainer? I don't know if I believe that, but it does put Liège-Bastogne-Liège into question. And then most importantly, probably bends the Giro d'Italia attempt that because that could really hurt his preparation for the Giro.
I don't know if that ever was a plan. I think he's going to keep going for the Tour and try to improve there. But we all know, I mean, listen, I think it's better. It's actually better for his peace of mind also to set certain goals that are like not in a distant future, but not in the immediate future. And then, whatever happens, and he's going to heal faster than normal, than any normal person. Then it's every time it's a little win, I think the most important is that the injuries he has will not be felt in the future. He's gonna come back. I'm pretty confident of that.
I mean, and this is just assuming he's not too sad about the news of Patrick Lefevere stepping down as CEO of the Soudal-QuickStep team. Will Evenepoel even have the will to continue? I was really caught off guard by this, but the COO, Jürgen Foray, will take over the role of CEO that Lefevere has had for over 20 years. And then Lefevre is going into an honorary board member position.
A lot longer than 20 years. I think 20 years with Soudal-QuickStep. But Patrick Lefevre, let's not forget, first of all, Patrick Lefevre was a professional cyclist. He was pretty good as a young cyclist, retired really early. I think probably like 26, 27 years old, and became a sports director straight away. He was the youngest, one of the youngest. I think when he was 28 or 29, he was a sport director already. And I know this story because he's from my area, and there were some riders that one of the riders that I looked up to was Patrick Shakeups, who was my trainer and my mentor. Was on a team which was actually directed by Patrick Lefevre back then. So he's been, he's almost 70, right?
Yeah.
Almost 70. I think he turned 70. So it's more than 40. I think it's 42 years that he's been a sport director. So it did come as a surprise because there was no signs of it, but at the same time, I think it's been a really, really nice ride for him. I've seen some stats, almost 1,000 victories in total of all his teams, 19 world champions, I think. I don't know how many monuments. I mean, I forgot the numbers now, but I think it's a nice way. I think it's a nice way for him to leave. And listen, when you're almost 70 years old, I can understand that you don't want to deal with the day-to-day hassle of managing, a team. I mean, if you think about the professional team and the women's team, these are more than 100 people, if not more, that you're responsible for. And so he steps down as the CEO, correct? He was a co-owner of the team. I don't know if that's still the case, but he will stay involved. And and I wanted to say, first of all, I want to congratulate Patrick personally on his amazing career. If you have been such a long time around and you see all these accomplishments, it's actually crazy to see those numbers. But I would like to mention one thing, and we all know Patrick has been very outspoken about certain things. He always had a strong opinion. Sometimes, didn't have a filter in his columns. Sometimes said things that were, sometimes a bit offensive, maybe sometimes taken out of context. If you look at all the reactions and the comments of ex-cyclists, big champions, ex-staff members, and staff members that were or are still on the team, I have not seen one single negative comment about Patrick. They're all full of praise, admiration, respect. He may have been painted as this bullish person who always spoke his mind. But I know for a fact that there's a tremendous amount of respect. And I think that there's no better tribute to what a person is and what he has been for the sport and for his teams than all these comments, these super nice comments of respect and congratulations that we're seeing. I just wanted to mention that because, he's been pictured as a bad guy, and, a lot of people, a lot of Twitter haters were kind of, insulting him and wishing him bad and really not nice. But if you see all the comments, I think it speaks for himself. Nobody of all these critics knows exactly who the person Patrick Lefevre is. And all these comments speak for themselves, I think. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, people that work for the guy love him. To expand on that, he's kind of held the team together with his force of personality. Does this hurt their ability? I don't know. Think of all these sponsors. They're local Belgian sponsors that I'm sure he has a relationship with. Are those held in place even with him stepping back from the day-to-day stuff?
Well, I think that's also one of the reasons that he will kind of stay involved a little bit in the background, because his team has been built on relationships, and those relationships are Patrick Lefevre's relationships. I think I'm not worried for the continuity of the team. I've seen the declarations of Bacala, who has committed publicly to keep funding the team in the future. And let's not forget, they have one special card, which is not an insignificant one. It's Remco Evenepoel. There's a lot of people and a lot of sponsors who want to be associated with the rider and the image of Remco Evenepoel.
Yeah, I mean, they had a pretty good situation going last year. I feel like it was rocky when they were, the Classics team, the Classic Superstars. Probably just financially, that got a little bit too difficult. A lot of those riders aged out, and they kind of had a few rocky years. And then last year was the first year where I really felt like they've built this nice little program around Evenepoel. Like they're supporting him well in the Grand Tours. He can win one days, like hilly one days. Like I think I guess he's not going to do it now. He did kind of flirt with the idea of even like Flanders, which I think he could be pretty good at if he wanted to. So they've got a versatile star rider. It's a good situation. But on that note, team training camps underway, Johan, all in like one region of Spain. Just before we get into questions, can you explain to us why this happens? Why are they all in the same place?
Yeah, well, I read somewhere, that there's, I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems a lot, but 16 of the 18 World Tour teams or currently or will be in the next weeks in the area of the Costa del Sol, which is southeast of Spain. I think it's for one reason. Well, first of all, it's become a habit. Logistically, it's quite easy to get to Spain because, if you do team training camps, you have to get the staff, you have to get the vehicles, the buses, the trucks, cars. So that's number one. Secondly, it's an area which after, in the last 20 years has gradually been growing and accommodating cyclotourism. It's catering for cyclists. It's crazy how much, even if the professionals are not there, it's unbelievable how many. I'm actually going next week for 4 days to Calpe Benissa with my son and two of his friends. So we're going to see a lot of cyclists. But I think the most important reason is that statistically, that area, if you look on the map from Valencia down to Alicante, that area statistically is the best in terms of weather. It's constantly between 15 and 22 degrees and quite stable. And if it's bad weather there, it's bad weather in the rest of Europe. And so I think that plus the roads are amazing. There's a bit of everything. You can ride on the flats. You can have some climbing, not super hard climbs, but hard enough for the beginning of the season. So I think that's the reason, and also that people cycling and cyclists on the road. It's part of the natural habitat of that of that area. It's just part of it,
Yeah, I'm looking at the weather now. It's like every day is like 18 degrees to 9 degrees. That's like mid 60s to high 40s in Fahrenheit. And I'd also imagine quite dry and B, quite empty in the wintertime. Like that's too cold probably to be like on a beach holiday.
No, you can't go to it's not beach weather right now, but it's not super busy. So, once you get away from the coast and inland, you can ride for hours and hours and not see anybody. Plus, now everybody already knows. I lived there. I lived there in the early 90s. I lived there for like almost 10 years. And back then it was not, it was popular, but not as now it's really overwhelming. And it's also because there's so many businesses that have been going there, bike shops, cafes, a lot of businesses that are actually specifically catering for cyclists. And of course, if the professional teams go there, the cyclotourists and the cyclists wannabes, they all want to go there too. So everybody's there.
Yeah, when you're on a cycling trip or just in Europe to ride, it is nice when there's infrastructure like plugged in around that. It makes it so much easier.
Also, let's not forget another thing I forgot to mention. Not that it really, it does matter for teams also because, if you have to move the whole team, and it's like 60 people. The prices, it's not expensive. It's not expensive now in this time of the year.
Is that? I mean, do you want to guess where Bora's doing that training camp? German team.
I'm going to say one.
Yeah, Mallorca, but that seems to be like not as in vogue, I guess. But it's probably more expensive, rains more.
It still is. I mean, it's also amazing. It's more or less the same climate, but the weather can change a bit more because it's an island, so it's it's kind of more variable than on the land, But actually, I'm going there the first week of January, so I may see them too.
Yeah, you might. The miles
are putting in private training camps.
You might be joining the team next year. This is a big reveal. So we'll get into a few questions. info@wedo.team if you want them answered. They're kind of building up, so we're not going to get to all of them, but we do have a plan over the holidays to have a few episodes where we just rip through a bunch of them and hopefully get that balance back down. Just before we do that, though, I forgot to mention this on Pogačar's new bike, Aero bike. Important because in the last 2 years, 12 of the 13 biggest one-day races have been won by solo attacks by the winner. So looking at that data, you'd say, maybe I should get on a pretty Aero bike for some of these one-day races because I'm probably going to win it solo. First question, I just wanted to clear something up. I got a few responses saying that Ineos did not race Pidcock at Lombardia because they didn't want his points to go to Q36.5. That can't be true because points no longer go with the rider. They're with that, whatever team the rider scored the points for, which makes more sense than the old one.
No, the rider doesn't take the points to a new team. The points stay with the team the rider was on when he got the result.
Yeah, which is, I can't believe it was actually ever different than that. That was wild. But first question from Thomas in Luxembourg. Is kind of a goofy out there question, but I thought it was worth reading. Thanks for the podcast, your incredible insightfulness. Just a quick exercise. Just a thought exercise. What legally or otherwise is keeping World Tour teams from colluding to fund Tadej Pogačar's retirement? Based on your commentary on Tadej's €200 million buyout clause with UAE, couldn't teams pool together the capital and approach Tadej directly and have him just retire? At some level, Tadej has to walk away. He has a walkaway price, but even if he doesn't, would the current structure in cycling allow this contract? It probably would. It's funny that we're even taught that he's so good that this is where we're at. Teams colluding together to pay him to go away.
Never going to happen. That's that. Yeah, I can't see the sense of that question, but a part of the money he makes, Spencer. These guys don't race primarily for the money. They race because they're racers and they want to win and they want to, they have their ego and they want to, beat their rivals. Of course, when you're at a certain level, then you want to make good money and as much as possible. But no, that's never going to happen.
It's a funny thing, like Red Bull paying him $200 million to have like a middle management position at Red Bull and not race. But I guess to even can entertain it seriously, it starts to become problematic because what is the value of, let's say Pogačar he took a job at Red Bull for $200 million and just worked in the office there. And then Primož Roglič is winning the Tour. The problem with that is, what's the value of him continuing to just be amazing and become like a sporting icon in Slovenia? Think of your friend Eddie Merckx. That guy's still dining out on his sporting exploits. There's such a long tail when you're such a good, accomplished athlete like that. Michael Jordan has had a second career where he's made far more money than he ever made playing basketball. So it actually would be hard to quantify. I feel like harder than you'd think. And he's probably better off just sticking around and racing. Second and last question for the day from Maxine in Belgium. I was having trouble remembering if I read this or not. So apologies if I don't think this is a repeat, but it's good that I was so good I was willing to risk it. There's been some talk about Remco leaving QuickStep. In the case of Remco changing teams, for example, to Ineos or Red Bull, are you sure that he would be their sole or main leader for stage races? He is, of course, an incredibly talented rider, but is he better enough than the current leaders of those teams to be their undisputed leader? And as if Remco is sufficiently comfortable to go head to head with Carlos Rodriguez or Primoz Roglic, and is he sufficiently comfortable to go head to head with Carlos Rodriguez or Primoz Roglic for team leadership in a Grand Tour?
Yeah, we had this question already, Spencer.
Well, I think I asked it to you just privately.
Oh, maybe could be.
Yeah.
I think well, if he would go to Ineos, yes, he would be the sole leader. There's nobody, not even Bernal or Geraint Thomas or Carlos Rodriguez, who's at the level of Remco, in my opinion, or has the potential. And if he goes to Red Bull Bora, then there's Primoz, but Primoz would not be for whatever the time of the contract of, because if Remco goes somewhere else, I would imagine it's for 3 years minimum. And Primoz, although they seem to say that Primoz is still improving and is producing better numbers than in the past, I think we've seen the best Primoz Roglic already, and whatever Primoz improves, the rest is also going to improve on. So he would have to share leadership with Primoz Roglic at first at Red Bull, and then become the sole leader. But yeah, I mean, I think right now it looks like Remco is staying put with Soudal-QuickStep. So no, I mean, but yeah, if he goes to Ineos, he would be the sole leader, and if he goes to Red Bull Bora, initially he would have to share it and then become the sole leader afterwards.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, because it's like, we're all assuming he's better than them, but is he better enough to get rid of the problems? I think the main problem would have been this year, like him and Primoz. Imagine them at like the Vuelta this year, like that would be a mess. But since he's at Quick-Step this year, Primoz cannot be good this good forever. And I even think you saw him maybe succumbing to some sort of age-related decline this year. So in 2026,
well, let's have first of all, let's try to have a season that Primoz stays on his bike and is not on the floor. That would be a good start to see really.
Well, that is how people, usually athletes start to decline, not because it's like people think they just get old and they can no longer move. It's the injuries start to stack up and you can't train as consistently as you would like to or you used to, and then you decline because of that. So those injuries will start to catch up to him if he keeps crashing like that.
Yeah. Speaking of injuries, and then you've mentioned him before, Eddy Merckx. I just want to take the opportunity to wish Eddy Merckx all the best, for people who have been following the news. So he had a crash while he was out on his bike in Belgium, and unfortunately broke his hip. Eddy is in his late 70s now, so it's amazing that he's still riding on his own, by the way, out there in Belgium at the moment of the crash. And fortunately, I mean, it all went well. He had to have surgery. Instead of repairing the fracture, they put an artificial hip. I spoke to him by message, and he said that everything was fine. He had surgery, I think, on Monday or Tuesday, and the day after, he walked out of the hospital on crutches, but he walked out of the hospital. So also still a champion in that way. And so I wish him all the best, and sure he's going to recover pretty soon, and he's for sure going to go on his bike again.
I hope with company. That's the only thing I worry about. I don't want Eddy out there by himself.
I actually told him and said, Eddy, please go. There's so many people who want to ride with you. Just go with someone, So, I mean, he didn't respond to that, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be careful. I mean, it was, it's not because he wasn't careful. It was just an unfortunate crash. But yeah, I mean, it was when of course, in Belgium, it was big news. It was all over the news and on TV. But he actually got surgery. The surgeon who operated him was the same who operated Remco. Very famous surgeon.
It's this like same orthopedics clinic that every cyclist seems to go to.
Yeah.
I might hit this up for my next surgery, but we're at our time. There is a question right in my line of sight that is going to be really fast to answer. I just want to get out of the way. So David, wrote in basically asking, how did the World Championships end up in Rwanda, and what are the extra logistics for the team? I think we can just quickly answer the first part of that and say they paid a bunch of money. That's how you get the World Championships. You go to the UCI, you say, we're going to pay you a whole bunch of money and you're going to have the World Championships here. And they say, that sounds like a good idea.
There's more to that. There's more to that than just that. But, if you look at when the World Championships, first of all, is the event owned by the UCI. Let's not forget, there's a lot of politics involved. And in terms of election or re-election, or even election for another position. In this case, we all know that Lapartien is supposed to run for presidency of the IOC. Don't be surprised that it had a big impact also in having the biggest event in cycling in Africa, because there's a lot of federations in Africa who have votes, not just for cycling, but also for all other sports. And Lapartien is a master at lobbying for whatever he wants to accomplish. So I'm pretty sure that a part of the money, there's another thinking behind the fact that the World Championships are in Africa for the first time in history. And I think it's nice, but it's not the first country you would think of if you think about having the World Championships somewhere. And logistically, I mean, it's not that big of a deal because it's with federations. And of course, everything is going to be provided by the country. I mean, they're not going to go there. The Belgians are not going to go there with their cars. It's going to be all provided by the organization. So, but yeah, I think it's twofold. It's financial and it's political.
This actually could get tricky for, I know when the Worlds were in Australia, I know riders on the men's team, at least for the road race, that had to fly themselves there, on their own dime. So if it's tough if it's a far away, if you're an American rider, you're probably paying your own way. And we should say the UCI, most of their budget comes from the World Championships and the Olympics. That's how they continue to pay the bills. So
and China.
That Chinese race, Tour of Guangxi. Yeah. So they have to go far afield to find. You can't just keep going, but you can't say Hamburg, you want to host Worlds? You got to go further afield to find new customers, basically. I'm kind of curious though, now that you mention it, if you're South Africa, the South African Olympic Federation, are you that's awesome, man, that you did the Worlds in Rwanda? Does Africa really vote as a block like that? Or are they why don't you do it in my country?
No. There's different federations, and I don't exactly know how it works, but they have a heavy weight. Africa, and also I'm going to say the Caribbean. The Caribbean is also, there's
interesting.
If you look, you just have to look where the presidents of the federations are now and then. If you follow their trajectory, you know what they're going to do. They're going to go for votes. They're going to get votes.
And Rwanda has a really ambitious government, so they really want this. I'm shocked that it's never been in Morocco. That'd be the slam dunk. It's very close, good terrain, but I guess they're not interested in shelling out for that. But thanks, Johan. And do you have anything else to add before we take off?
Nope, that's it.
All right, we'll be back next Friday, and we hope that no big news breaks right after we finish recording this last week.
Thanks, Spencer.
All right, talk to you later.